Good news, I remembered my password. Now imagine a swampy island, 3 kilometers long or 1.8 miles long and only 600 meters wide, filled with 6,000 hungry people with no food to eat. Even though it was last spring month, May, it was still very cold, dropping as low as -5 Celsius or 23 Fahrenheit. It was a pure survival of the fittest, and it happened almost 100 years ago deep in Soviet Russia. Now, why people were sent to such an inhospitable place? It all started when in 1932 Soviet Union decided to reinstate the passport system. Passports in the Soviet Union were more of a tool for the government to limit people to certain regions. For example, you required a passport to move from a rural village to an urban city. The government didn't issue them to people it didn't want in cities. A prime example being peasants, intellectuals, former merchants or petty criminals. Keep in mind that there was a famine rampaging through Soviet Union, especially in the rural parts, so people were hoping to escape it in a big cities like for example Moscow. Such rampant immigration overburdened cities and Stalin decided it was the best to reinstate passport system to control this inflow of people. However, thousands of peasants who had migrated to cities didn't get passports, so they became illegals in their own country. Stalin decided to arrest these illegals to cleanse the cities, so anyone found on the streets without a passport was sent to the gulags. For those of you who aren't aware, gulags are worse than prisons. Combine back-breaking labor, sadist guards, quadrillion fist-sized mosquitoes, no food, diseases, harsh climate, and you get a gulag. In 1932, head of secret police Genrik Yagoda and Matvey Berman, head of Gulag camp system, suggested to Stalin that there is this huge wide area in Siberia which potentially could be turned into a food-producing self-sufficient land, which was far from the reality. The ongoing famine couldn't support such endeavors, and prisoners which were sent there had to basically materialize food out of thin air, either through fishing, hunting or gathering. But to the leaders this seemed like a good idea. They will get rid of unwanted folks from overcrowded cities, and they also may be able to farm land and produce food in such dire famine times. Just to give you an idea, the lowest minimum temperature recorded in Siberia is negative 67.7 Celsius or minus 89.9 Fahrenheit. Unlike Europe, which has softer climate due to Atlantic Ocean, Siberia has nothing, maybe an Arctic Ocean which sucks at getting land warm. Not only that, but the soil there is mostly made out of acidic pot soil, which is terrible for farming. Don't get me wrong, there are some areas which can be potentially farmable, but how can it be done with empty stomach? All this didn't matter to Genrik Yagoda, who instructed the police to arrest thousands of people to fulfill his plan. Under his command, the police arrested every person without a passport they could find on the streets. That's around 80,000 people from Moscow alone. Citizens had to carry passport with them at all times, because at any moment, maybe while going to buy cigarettes or a load of bread, they could be arrested. Even if you had passport but left it at home, most likely nobody cared and still sent you to your doom in Siberia. The result was simple. The gulags were now filled with more prisoners than ever. While some of them were ordinary folks, even political prisoners, hardened criminals were among the mix. The result was that over 2 million prisoners were at the disposal of Genrik Yagoda to inhabit Siberia. Genrik Yagoda started dispatching them in small groups to different parts of Siberia. One group of around 25,000 prisoners reached Tomsk, one of the biggest cities in Siberia. It was decided that some of them would be shipped to Nazino Island with some supplies. And what were the supplies? The supplies included a small portion of bread per passenger, around 300 grams. Obviously, criminals beat weaker people and stole their rations and clothes. So the hell started before they even arrived at the wretched Nazino Island. After a troublesome journey, the group reached Nazino Island to farm and sustain themselves. However, they were not given food, shelter, tools or clothing. once they got off the ship. The only food was 20 tons of flour, about 4 kilograms or 9 pounds per person. No cooking utensils were provided. That means no pots to boil flour and no spoons to eat it. Even the 50 guards and 2 commanders which were supposed to keep order on island had no uniforms and no shoes. Prisoners that stepped on the island had the same clothes they had when they were arrested. Remember, they were arrested in cities from warmer climate, so these clothes weren't suitable for harsh Siberia weather. Soviet guards counted 322 women, 4,556 men, and 27 dead people which died during the trip from Tomsk town to the island. About 30% of people were too weak to stand. It was a complete shit show. On the first night, 295 prisoners died because they had nowhere to sleep in temperatures which at the time were below 0 Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit, so the island's inhabitants had to fight severe cold weather and hunger, and let me tell you, with empty stomach you freeze quickly. In desperation, some started even eating bark and moss. Few days later, just as guards started to distribute flour, a fight broke out and guards started shooting prisoners. The flour was moved to the shore opposite the island and the distribution of flour was continued in the morning. The same thing happened again, more fighting, more shooting, so they came up with a plan. Make one person responsible for 150 people and these brigadiers had to distribute flour to people of their group. Imagine my surprise when I read that these brigadiers were often criminals which didn't share and ate others' rations. Those lucky which got their hand on flour realized that there is no way to bake it and ate it simply by mixing flour with river water, which led to violent dysentery. Instead of pots which didn't exist, people used their hats and shoes to make this flour soup. Not surprisingly, some prisoners tried to escape the island, but the river Ob surrounding it was freezing. Since they were starving, they didn't have much energy to swim either. Even after all these insurmountable problems, if someone managed to reach the other shore, the guards shot them. Some guards hunted and killed escapees as if they were hunting animals for sport. This is especially upsetting when you realized they were their own countrymen. Obviously, most of people out there knew nothing about clearing the land and cultivation. Even if they did, the lack of living space, good clothes and food made it impossible. People were frequently murdered in fights over food, money or some valuable such as gold and teeth. If you were a normal person, not only you had to survive all these things plus hardened criminals, but there was also a danger of some guards which were enjoying causing terror and killing people for minor offenses. For some reason, those guards didn't bother with criminals in this prison island. A lack of food came with one inevitable consequence: cannibalism. Just 3 days after prisoners set foot on Nazino Island, there were 5 signs of cannibalism already. During later months, this number grew way worse. A girl who survived the island remembered a guard named Kostya Venikov. This guard fell in love with one of the Nazino's inhabitants and protected her. However, when he left the island just for 1 day, other inhabitants tied her to a tree, sliced her up, and started eating her flesh while she was alive. Kostya couldn't do much when he returned. Crazy part that she was still alive when he returned. She later died due to blood loss, absolutely sickening. One witness added that the trees over the island were used to hang human flesh. Once the prisoners were moved away from the island, the nearby villagers came to know of the horrors happening on the island. One villager named Feofila Bilina came across a woman from the island. Her calves were cut from her body. When asked, she remarked that her calves had been cut, cooked and eaten. In the meantime, the Soviet Union government pretended that island experiment was going great. However, soon the story started leaking out, forcing the government to investigate by sending communist instructor Vasily Velichenko to the island to prepare a report stating how successful this experiment was. But Velichenko didn't lie, and once his report reached Moscow, the officials couldn't believe how horrible it was in there, causing them to send another commission to the island. The commission found 31 mass graves with 57 corpses each. However, the commission took more time, which means even more deaths on the island. Finally, once the commission confirmed that findings, the Kremlin marked the earlier report as top secret and shut down the project. However, taking prisoners off the island took another month, which translated to even more deaths. In the end, around 80 guards and prisoners were prosecuted on various charges ranging from assault to looting to cannibalism. Most time guards served for their crimes was just 3 years. All prisoners were taken off island by August of the same year. So between May of 1933 and August, 4,500 prisoners died on the island. The remaining 2,200 weren't in good shape either. Only 300 out of them were considered fit and healthy. Who the hell remains healthy in such place? Once the prisoners were taken off the island, they had their horrific tales to tell. One such a prisoner was Uglov, who stated that he only ate livers and hearts of people who were about to die. In a way, he provided relief to them a few days earlier. He said you could see that a person was a goner, that they would die anyway in a day or two, so it would be easier for them to die now, right away, instead of suffering for 2 or 3 more days. Since the report was classified as top secret, the public only learned about it in the late 1980s when USSR was on the brink of collapse. Velichko was punished for the original report, he was fired and expelled from the Communist Party, but that is not bad considering the fact that Stalin was wiping people left and right. For example, these 2 guys who came up with the Siberia work bullshit were executed during the Purge. There are way more gruesome details and various testimonies about Nazino Island. You can find this stuff in a book called Cannibal Island, Death in a Siberian Gulag. I can't even imagine what the prisoners would have gone through during the period of 13 weeks when they had no food, no shelter or clothes, and were subjected to cannibalism. While the government tried hard to cover things up, the locals and the prisoners ensured nobody forgot it.